Good evening and welcome to this episode of the Hagen History Center Speaker Series. I'm your host, George Deitch, Executive Director of the Erie County Historical Society. Our beautiful campus with 4 exhibit buildings and research library is open Tuesdays through Saturdays from 10 to 5 and Sundays from noon to 5. As a tribute and thank you to those who have served our country, tomorrow, Veterans Day, all active duty, National Guard, and veterans will receive free admission if you come down to see the museum and a discount of $11.11 on a new or renewed membership. See our Facebook or website for more info. And you can go to eriehistory.org. That's eriehistory.org. So tonight, Mary Jane Koenig and Bill Welch will speak about Erie County's role in World War I. They were part of the group that authored a book on the subject this year. They'll be speaking about the effort behind the book and the memorial on State Street to those that gave their lives, the local National Guard units and those who were in the 80th Division, plus the role of Erie's Black population in various roles of Erie County women. So Mary Jane Phillips Koenig was raised in Union City, Erie County, Pennsylvania. She has degrees in French and English from Gannon and Edinburgh, studied 1 year at a university in France. She retired as an Erie School District teacher for 34 and a half years, mostly at East High. She's been researching her great uncle and his actions in World War I, his letters home for over 20 years. She and her husband made 2 trips to World War I battlefields and American cemeteries in France and Belgium, and many areas affected by the war, including Verdun, Reims, Fismes, Flanders, and the area of Alsace-Lorraine. Now, Mary Jane is the chair of the Erie County World War I Centennial Committee and is an editor and writer of the new book, Answering the Call. She is the regent of the Presque Isle chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. She's been actively involved with both the U.S. Brig Niagara and the Congressional Medal of Honor curriculum writing. So Bill Welch is an instructor at Mercyhurst University, Department of Intelligence Studies. His primary focus in the department has been teaching intelligence communications at the undergrad and graduate level. He joined the department in 2006 after receiving his master's degree in applied intelligence from Mercyhurst. He is currently actively involved with the Erie World War I Centennial Committee, producing the book Answering the Call, Erie County, Pennsylvania in World War I. The publication was completed this year. And in 2019, the committee erected a plaque at the Erie County Veterans Memorial Park, which is across the street from Veterans Stadium, and it names nearly 200 service members with connections to Erie County who gave their lives in World War I. Welch was also active in the flagship Niagara League since its early days in the mid-'80s and into the first decade of the millennium. He served as board president, board secretary, gift shop manager, docent, and a sailor on the U.S. Brig Niagara. He had a 29-year career as a reporter and city editor for the Morning News and the Erie Times News. In those years, he wrote stories about more than 50 local veterans of World War I, World War II, and Korea. Bill received his bachelor's degree in journalism from Point Park University. He is editor of the Analyst Style Manual published at Mercyhurst Institute for Intelligence Studies. He's been married to Patty Murray Welch since 1973. They have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. Luckily for him, all living in Erie. Now, I've known both Mary Jane and Bill for many years. Bill and I both served on the board of the Niagara League and both served as president of the league. All 3 of us crewed on Niagara during those wonderful days of sailing her in the 90s and early 2000s. It was great comradeship, and we all were able to make many friendships that have lasted all these years. And so I'd like to welcome my 2 friends, Mary Jane and Bill, and to this. And so now for the rich and poignant story of Erie County's involvement and sacrifice in the Great War, Mary Jane and Bill.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, George, for your great introduction. And we're here to give you an overview of our book, Answering the Call, Erie County, Pennsylvania in World War I. As we explore the book tonight, I want you to reflect on the date coming up tomorrow, November 11th, the 123rd anniversary of Armistice Day. I also want you to think about your possible family connection to what was called the Great War, or the war to end all wars. In the next slide, you'll see the Erie County World War I Centennial Committee, which was formed in August of 2018. As I have already said, we were energized by how Europe was commemorating the centennial, and we thought Erie County could do that too. Every committee member brought something special to our purpose, whether they were DAR, veterans, historians, all were interested in World War I. The guiding principles of our work were to honor those who served and help others remember their sacrifice. We raised money to have the memorial built and placed at Veterans Park, located between State Street and Glenwood Park Avenue in Erie, across from Veterans Memorial Stadium. We were supported by the area veterans organizations, county and city government, as well as historical societies, including Erie County Historical Society. The memorial dedicated, I'm still on the other slide. The memorial dedicated May 25th, 2019, honors those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the war. We also placed a plaque on the stadium wall to honor those who served in World War I. The stadium was originally built as a tribute to the men and women of the World War. Okay, now this next slide. While we were working on developing the memorial, we learned that over 297,000 Pennsylvanians served in World War I, and we believe that includes at least 4,000 from Erie County. 198 men with a connection to Erie County made the ultimate sacrifice. After completing that memorial, we realized that we had enough research to plan a book. And we were so fortunate in September 2019 to be awarded an Erie County Gaming Revenue Authority grant for $15,000 so that we could print the book and help maintain the memorial. Every penny of the sale of the books goes towards the upkeep of the memorial. Next slide. Okay. There are several sections in the book. For example, we included biographies of those who died. There are scrapbook photos and sketches about personal aspects of the war. There are articles about Erie County on the front line. Another section features Erie County on the home front, what was going on to support the war effort, including what women were doing. Toward the end of the book is a list of over 2,300 men and women from Erie County who served. This is the most comprehensive list to date, but we know it is not complete.
Okay. One of the things we wanted to do with this book, and actually I think it was when our committee was doing the research on the names for the plaque, we realized that each of us, as we're just checking into these names and verifying them, found so much interesting information. We wanted to do more, and ultimately that led to the production of was a key inspiration for doing this book. And so we get a committee of about 4 or 5 of us, Ann Silverthorne, Sue Muller, Mary Jane, myself, and Mark Stagg, looked up all these names and tried to find out, luckily we can find these things out today mainly through the internet, and got addresses, dates of birth, where people worked, what units they were in, maybe some, a little bit about how and where they died. and we're able to include this in the book, and we have well over, I think, close to 50 pages of it. And another thing we're able to do was, because there's 2 books out there that already had many pictures of them in it. A book that was published in, I think, both in the 1920s, one about the National Guard unit out of Erie, out of all Pennsylvania, and then one about Erie County in World War I. And that's where you see the photos of these 2 young men here. A lot of stirring information, just to see the youth of them, I think, was what really hit home so often with them. So we try to, again, show what units they were in, maybe where they're buried now, and any other information we could find on them and squeeze in. So that's, we think this is probably the heart, certainly the heart and the soul of this book, and everything else sort of flows around that. Mary Jane?
There's a special section in the book about Erie County's industrial power during World War I. From engines to paper, from bombs to boilers, Erie played a very important part. Some companies still exist today, like General Electric. GE provided 12-inch shells for howitzers, locomotives, and equipment for Navy destroyers. Welch's and Reed manufacturing still exists today. But there are industries that are no longer in Erie, like Continental Rubber Works that made rubber parts for gas masks. American Brake Shoe and Foundry, with 70,000 employees, made howitzers. Hammermill Paper received an order for 2 million pounds. You can go to the next slide. Hammermill Paper received an order for 2 million pounds of paper to be used for the draft cards that we can still see today on Ancestry and other genealogical sites. American Sterilizer had contracts for portable sterilizing units towed by horses, which killed lice and bacteria.
So after the war, the effort to pay for the war continued. Bond drives went on, continued on. There was went in for the year or 2 after the war. One of the ways to get people to turn out and show up and then bring some money with them as part of these bond drives was to bring the captured U-boats around to various ports around the United States, and luckily they could fit into the Great Lakes seaway system. So what we have here is one of those German terror weapons, the U-boat. This is a mine-laying U-boat, the UC-97. It was not one that fired torpedoes, but one that cruised underwater and laid mines in shipping lanes. And what we have on screen here is a very rare photo of that, of its visit to the Erie Public Steamboat Landing. We know it now as Dobbins Landing. Thousands of people turned out to view and take a walk on board the submarine. It continued around the Great Lakes and hit just about every major port. And ultimately, rather than put it back on the East Coast or wherever it may have been, it was used as target practice in Lake Michigan. Our chapter on this book was written by Chris Stubbs, who's written extensively about this whole chapter of U-boats after World War I, and has also written some other books, I think, about journalism during World War I as well. My first touch with World War I, other than watching movies or whatever, was as a reporter in 1979 when I was assigned to go visit a man named Carlisle Green out in Northeast. He was a runner for Company G, the local National Guard unit, and he told me his harrowing experiences about a night in August 1918, and we'll go into that a little later. That sparked a few more. The boss liked that, so we interviewed a few more people, a few more veterans, and that sort of resonated with me years later when the World War II anniversary came along. The World War I interviews of my life were sort of bookended then with an interview with Alex Zaleski, shown here in 1999 when he was 103 years old. So that all that sort of leads to my interest in the local units and very much more. The National Guard of Pennsylvania was mobilized shortly after war was declared in 1917. And ultimately were sent off to Camp Hancock, Georgia for training. Before that, however, they were mobilized in their company headquarters, which in Erie County was at Corey for Company A and Erie for Company G. They're the 8th Pennsylvania Regiment, or a 16th Pennsylvania Regiment. They stayed in Erie and Corey until September 1917. I think I may have said 1918, I hope not. At any rate, they did their training in the county here, then were shipped off to Camp Hancock in Georgia, where a reorganization of the military occurred, and the 16th Infantry Regiment was merged with the 8th Infantry Regiment from Southeast Pennsylvania to produce the new 112th Infantry Regiment. 4 regiments were built this way in Pennsylvania to form the 28th Division, the Keystone Division. The Keystone Division trained in Camp Hancock until May of 1918, when they went off to France. Or first they arrived in England in May of 1918, and then ultimately crossed the English Channel into France, and then underwent more training, more realistic training from English instructors who had been through the war and were able to give them more realistic training and all that.
Bill, can I just interrupt about 2
Sure.
quick things here? First
Yeah.
of all, those of you that are watching live on Facebook, please feel free, if you have a question, to hit your comment section and put in your requests, and we'll try to answer those questions. And I have a spur of the moment question, Bill, from myself. This rather fascinating picture you have of the men coming out of the trench and training. Can you tell us a little bit about those leather-looking leggings they have above their shoes or boots?
What they have, there is 2 interesting thing back then. They wore shoes, right? Not boots. We think of combat boots. And in World War I, they wore shoes, and they wore leggings above those shoes. And what we have here is what they used stateside primarily were the canvas leggings that were buttoned up and down, up the side of as you can see on that fellow at the far left there. He's his closest, and the fellow behind him. So they were buttoned up the side and protect the ankles, protect the lower leg from all the brush and et cetera that they would be expected to go through. Once overseas, they typically did the wraparound, I think they're called puttees, where they about 1.25 inch strip of cloth that they actually wrapped up all the way just up to just short of the knee. When I did my interviews, I asked them about that, and I thought that these canvas leggings would have been more preferred, and they said, and it was actually Felix Krzyzewski said no, it was far more comfortable to wear the strips of cloth around their lower legs. So there you have it. So getting back to in July, early first days of July 1918, there's a few divisions in France. Fewer have already gone to the front line. The 28th Division is training, but the Germans are on the move. They're in a full-blown offensive. They are threatening Paris, and the French want more Americans on the line. So the permission or whatever, the 28th was committed. But first, it was the first 2 regiments, the 109th and 111th, or 110th of the 28th that went into action of about almost a week before the 112th, our regiment, and the 111th. As a result, they went to Chateau Thierry, which was a key place where American Division, the 3rd Division, the 28th, the 26th, put a stop to the German offensive. As the 4th Division, which was half Marines, half Army, at Belleau Wood, stopped the Germans there. The 112th was mainly in reserve, but and in support for those others once it did arrive at the lines. To give them some more training, though, they took a few men from each company and put them into action to attack Hill, I think it's 204. And that was where Company G's first casualty occurred, with Billy Simpson, who's the namesake of American Legion or VFW Post 471 on West 26th Street. From so mainly the 112th was in support during most of July. Ultimately started moving forward. They were close enough to the battle line, however, to experience their first artillery attacks and barrages and to learn the horror of that. Ultimately, the whole Allies started advancing in that area. The French and the Americans pushed the Germans back from the Marne River to the Ourcq River, O-U-R-K, not O-R-C for you Lord of the Rings fans. And O-R-U-K, O-R-U-Q, that's how it's spelled, not. And they, again, the 112th was mainly in support. It was the other 2 regiments that were at the front of the line, so to speak, for the 28th, until ultimately by August 7th, the division reached the town of Fimes, or Fismes, if you wanted to totally anglicize it, F-I-S-M-E-S. And we're almost there. So we'll get, yeah, there's the town of Fimes. And the 112th was key in actually breaking through into Fimes and going across a small creek called the Vessel, and crossing the Vessel into the suburb of Fimes called Fismet or Fimet. Mary Jane's our French speaker, and I know she cringes every time I say these town names. So from August 7th until the end of the month, the 28th Division was, its job, as ordered by the French, was to hold on to Fimes and Fimet across that creek. And the creek is only about as big as Mill Creek. It's not a big creek, but it was deep. And it was, the bridge had been blown. It was to cross over, they had to hop from blown stone, the stone bridge in pieces, they had to hop from stone to stone for 3 weeks. And what it was the regiments and battalions of the 28th Division rotated through one day or 2 day at a time. So that each had their time in this, as you can see, house to house, building to building fighting. What you see on the left here, by the way, is the town hall in Fimes, and which was the scene of the action for Company A. They had to advance down this street. A member of Company A was Harold W. Pierce, who kept a diary during the war, and after the war, he painted the scene on the right, which we ultimately, this painting has found its way to the Hagen History Center, is in storage there now, but it's going to be restored, and George assures me displayed. And but Harold Pierce made that painting, and we put this on the cover of our book because we thought we were just so impressed with it. On the night of August 27th, it was the turn for Company G and Company H to do their stint in Fimet and to continue to hold it against the Germans. This has been, over these 3 weeks, it's both sides shooting at each other, artillery, machine guns, snipers. It was, but it was a steady fighting, but not all out attack until that night. Company G was under the command of Lieutenant Edward Schmelzer from Erie, and Company H was from the Ridgeway area. They had just about gone into town and taken their positions when the Germans unleashed a massive artillery barrage and then a full-scale attack with their stormtroopers, 1,000 stormtroopers who came through, caught the Americans a little bit by surprise, I would suppose, but mainly just by their sheer numbers, by their use of flamethrowers, and bit by bit attacked positions of the Americans and wore them down, eroded the position over the next several hours. The Americans fought back heavily. Schmelzer, who's a German speaker, was actually trying to shout confounding orders to the Germans to throw them off guard, but obviously it wasn't enough. That was the night that Carlisle Green was ordered by Schmelzer to go back across the river and get help and let the battalion command know what was going on so they could send reinforcements. Carlisle Green and a friend made a run across the bridge. His friend was shot. Carlisle Green took a piece of shrapnel to the back of his neck. That night I interviewed him. He still had a piece of that shrapnel in the back of his neck, about the size of about 2 inches long, size of a cigarette. The companies were basically wiped out. Our whole position in Fismet was lost. Soldiers, either like 40 or 50 soldiers were killed. The rest were captured. About 30 escaped, and the rest were captured and marched off to prison camps, including Schmelzer. One of the outstanding stories of that night was Lieutenant Joseph Landry of Chautauqua County, who by all accounts stood there wherever he was in his position with a pistol and kept firing away at the Germans. There was a stack of bodies in front of him, and ultimately they shot and killed him. After this battle, companies G and H were essentially wiped out, so it was a few weeks more before they could be reconstituted with replacements and with the survivors from the battle. The 20th Division, about a week after this attack, they advanced again because the Germans, despite their success at Fismet, pulled back. The 20th Division and the 42nd and I think the 77th moved forward, but then moved forward to the next German line, and that's where everything stopped. The 20th Division was pulled out of the line in preparation for the big offensive that was going to be coming the last days of September, the Meuse Argonne offensive. And these soldiers thought, okay, we're being relieved. They're probably going to ship us home and make us instructors. We've got, this is great. And then they were, rousted in the night and moved to the front to make the attack on in what would run from September 26th to October 9th in the Meuse Argonne, one of the most the bloodiest battle in American history. More than 27 battle deaths, or nearly 27 battle deaths. For the 112th Regiment alone, they started that campaign on September 26th with 77 officers and 2,892 men. They ended with 10 officers and 533 men. The rest of the regiment were killed, wounded, worn out, or victims of the Spanish flu. And I should note, when we did our section on the deaths of World War I for the book, so many died of disease, presumably the Spanish flu. At the end of the war, total battle casualties for the 28th Division. Well, all right, I got carried away here. The battle casualties were 16,762. Killed in action, 2,316. Wounded, 9,609. Missing in action, 884. And 3,953 prisoners of war. The 28th Division came home in May of 1919. We had, this photo ran in the Erie Daily Times saying that Company G is on the way home. They're on the steamer Pocahontas. The National Archives simply says it's the 112th Regiment returns on the Pocahontas. Another unit that had a lot of Erie men was the 80th Division, the Blue Ridge Division, drawn from West Pennsylvania and Western Virginia. A lot of soldiers from Erie County ended up in the 318th or 319th Infantry Regiments, also the 313th and the 315th Machine Gun Battalions. Of course, we all remember, well, people of the Navy remember the 313th Machine Gun Battalion for the club they had at 20th and Peach Street that ultimately became the King's Rook. They went through a lot of action. They had 5,234 casualties, mainly in just the months of September and October. They were pretty well beat up too. The story of the 313th, by the way, is told by Mark Capitz, a Pittsburgh attorney whose grandfather from Erie served in 313th. That book is called Good War, Great Men, and you can get a copy at the Hagen History Center gift shop. We have a photo here, of part of the battalion in training at Camp Lee, Virginia. These Erie boys are using semaphore signals to spell out Erie, PA. And the P of PA is Private Lynn C Parker, a distant kin or a kin of Mary Jane. He's from Wattsburg area, and he served in the 313th Machine Gun Battalion as well. Yeah. Here's another shot of the 313th. In our book, we have pictures of them at their reunion in 1968, standing outside of the club at 19th or 20th and Peach. Okay, so Mary Jane, I'll hand it back to you. You're muted. Mary Jane, I think you're muted.
It's a really great honor to be, actually a privilege to be honoring these veterans and these service members tonight, as well as all service members and veterans who, especially the night before the armistice tomorrow. We're going to move to the home front in Erie County, and pictured here is the Lawson family. Benjamin and Carrie Lawson lived at 1511 Peach Street in Erie in 1917. Their 4 sons were inducted into the United States Army and all served overseas. Mrs. Lawson became a national deputy in the National Ladies Auxiliary of the Army and Navy Union. She sold almost $14,000 in war and thrift stamps in 2 weeks. Today, that would be worth over $23,000. Mr. Lawson, the father, was mustered into the Army as a member of Erie's Machine Gun Detachment with his brother. Both were cooks for the unit while it was still in the United States. Pictured here, besides Mr. and Mrs. Lawson, are Roy of the 507th Engineers Service Battalion, Samuel and Richard of the 351st Field Artillery, and Walter of the 506th Quartermaster Detachment. Next slide. Next slide. I don't know how. Okay, we're on the women's effort. Okay. Erie County women supported the war effort too. Pictured here in this lovely photo are Sarah Reed, who is facing the camera, the 3rd Regent of Prescott Chapter DAR, and Missouri Bliss Morrison in the center, the 1st Regent. Both women were founding members of the chapter. They are pictured here aboard the USS Wolverine with Commander William Morrison, Missouri Morrison's son. Prescott DAR collected money for orphans in Belgium and France and partnered with the American Red Cross to knit and mend items for the military. They even made jelly and candles for overseas. The Women's Club of Erie worked with American Sterilizer to supply materials to accompany AMSCO items being sent to the military. DAR, the Women's Club, Red Cross, YWCA, and other Erie groups were all actively involved in supporting America's war effort. The next slide. There is so much more in the book that captures Erie County's dynamic commitment to the war effort. There are articles about the 1918 flu pandemic, actually 2 articles. There's the Gold Star Mother's Pilgrimage in the 1930s, Erie's Wolverine Crew and the Blue Water Navy. There's a piece written by a Vietnam combat veteran, Why We Serve. And I wondered if you knew that themed sheet music was published locally by at least 6 different music publishers. One of the songs was called The Fighting 28th. And have you ever visited Bates Gallery at Edinburgh University? Waldo Bates, who nurtured its art department for over 3 decades, served in the 42nd Division, also known as Rainbow Division. He designed the Rainbow Division shoulder patch. The background of this particular slide is one of Bates' sketches. I don't know why the PowerPoint is doing that, but there you go. There's also an article about researching your World War I ancestor. And I hope you have been thinking about your connection when we started, or since we started. Next slide. This is a list of the contributors of what I call the dream team, those who contributed to the book, and all but 2 live right here in Erie County. You notice the name George Patton Waters, who wrote the foreword, and he's a personal friend of one of the editors. He is the grandson of General George Patton. You also notice there the email address. That's our email address if you have any questions or would like to order a book from us. Next slide. Our book has been reviewed by a nationally known historian, Peter Belmonte, and excerpts have appeared on a well-known World War I blog site, Roads to the Great War. As I mentioned before, no one received any compensation for their work, and all proceeds from the book are going toward the preservation of the World War I memorial across from the stadium. I think I've said that at least 3 times. Okay, next slide. We hope you will consider purchasing a book. It would be a great Christmas present. We have 2 slides of the county locations. These Little Annie's in Corey, Edinburgh Historical Society, the Northeast Historical Society, the Northeast Chamber of Commerce, and the office of Dr. Paul Benser in Lake City. And then the next slide, it's also available at these Erie locations, the Hagen History Center, where you can also order it online or go to the bookshop or bookstore, gift shop. Werner Books has the book, Romelo Chocolates, and Lake Life on 8th in Pittsburgh. We thank you so much for being here, and it was our pleasure to introduce you to answering the call. We would love to answer your questions.
Well, thank you very much. Great presentation, Mary Jane and Bill. And we do have some questions. I'm going to start with one of mine. Bill, you mentioned the young man that was from actually Youngsville, Warren County, but was in Company A out of Corey, where he enlisted, Harold Pierce. And the painting, which you show here from the cover of the book, is one of 4 paintings that he did that are now in the collection of the Erie County Historical Society. There's a diary. You've spoken to his descendants. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that and about possible plans to do a little more on Harold Pierce? You're muted, Bill.
You know, that will be the on the gravestone of many people after COVID, is that you are now muted, and that's the way it's going to stay. I became immersed in the story of Harold Pierce, who at age 18 joined Company A just days after war was declared, and kept a diary. an extensive diary. It's 79,000 words. That diary ran in the Titusville Herald back, it turns out, 1979, the same year I interviewed Carlisle Green and the other World War I vets. I had no idea. But also copies of that made it to a few museums, and it became cited in some of the books that I read while doing research for this project. And you know, just saw 112th quarter diary, someone 112th, and it said Harold Pierce in Company A. Wait a minute, and he's from, you know, looked him up. He's Youngsville, and all that. Kind of made it a mission to go find that diary, and ultimately transcribed it, and in the position in the process of preparing that for publication in a book. To fill out the story, I wanted to learn more about, and then, yeah, I should back up a little bit. I only knew about the diary. Then I talked to you, George, about these paintings. I thought, well, those paintings would make a great, not knowing who did them. And so the paintings might make a great addition to our book. We could maybe, you know, use it somehow to illustrate it. And I saw the one we have here, and I said, that's, we got to use that. And so I took a picture of it and we used it. I looked down in the corner and saw the name signed in the very low corner there, and it is H.W. Pierce. I was stunned. So, fast forward, got the diary underway, went to Ancestry.com, found the name of his descendants, thought, okay, maybe I can find a grandchild or so. Well, it turns out his daughter is still alive. She's 80 years old. She lives in New Jersey. I found her on Facebook, of course. Reached out to her, sent a message. Initially, she didn't answer, so I found her son's names and reached out to them, and they put me in touch. So I got to learn more about Harold W. Pierce, how he became a state policeman, how he became a police instructor for Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and so much more in his life. So hopefully within the next few months, we'll be able to talk even more about that completed and printed book.
Great. Now I've got a couple of questions that are near and dear to my heart. And then we've got a couple others to go over. But the first one was, you know, those of you who know my last name and know that my family has been here for, you know, multiple generations. What happened to and how was the German immigrant population in Erie treated? I know my own dad as a teenager, orphan of German immigrant parents, worked at the brake shoe, one of the 7,000 men that turned out artillery shells for the war industry. But can either one of you comment a little bit about Erie's German population during World War I?
I can say a little bit and briefly, and turn it back over to Mary Jane. Art Mills wrote about Erie and World War I as one of the articles in our book. Mentioned that, you know, there was a large, healthy German population here, Protestant and Catholic. When they'd had a German American Day, 12,000 people showed up. So, you know, it wasn't not a small amount of people. We had German publication newspapers who volunteered to follow all the guidelines. I think they even closed. But Erie sort of made the differentiation between our Germans and those Germans. And what we saw was that there was, like in some parts of the country where there were riots against Germans or businesses or windows broken and all that, there's no evidence that that occurred here. There was more anger about slackers, or about the Bolshevik, worry about the Bolsheviks, and not so much about the Germans in this county. Mary Jane, you got?
Ann Silverthorne did a great presentation on for the German Cultural Society about this topic. And one thing she pointed out, there are at least 3 men of German descent who are on our memorial. They were either first generation or born in Germany and served in the U.S. Army in France and were killed. And that brings me to the other topic about, we have some men on the memorial who served for Italy. They were they were immigrants to the United States and then went back and fought for Italy, and some went back and fought for Poland. I mean, that's a whole nother topic that's in the book, which I find quite fascinating, the ethnicities of Erie, who served in the United States military and went back and either fought for the United States or for their own country against the Germans. So I think that's what I would contribute to that discussion.
Well, that brings me to another question. And I recall all the information, all the digging, all the research that had to be done. What was your biggest challenge in getting the information for both the memorial and the book?
You want to start, Mary Jane?
We really, I tell people that there were 5 of us doing the research on the bios for the men who died. And we spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, each of us, researching and making certain that we had what we needed for the book. And when you look at the biographies, and I look at them today, they aren't very long, but yet they still capture the essence of the person. I wish we had more information. We tried to contact families. Families have contacted us, but the challenge was finding the information. And we had family, we had Ancestry and Family Search, and Find a Grave were some of our best resources. Even just Googling, there were lots of ways we tried to get around it. And I have to say, the best researchers in the country have to be right here in Erie County.
I think that was the challenge. There was, our initial list came out of the book that was printed about Erie County in the World War in 1921, and it had the list of 154 people who had died in that book. And that's what we started with. We ended up with 190 names on our plaque and 198 names in the book, and then we picked up even 2 more since the book. And got, and maybe there's more out there. We hope not. But tracking down, finding those sources there's a book called Pennsylvania in the World War, or Soldiers of the Great War. Volume 3 has a large list of Pennsylvanians who died, and that was instrumental for us. But tracking down some of those names in that first Erie County book, we still, we couldn't. John Murray, there's a guy named John Murray, and that one just drives me crazy. I can't find him. I could not find that guy. There's a few others too.
There's another instance of on the plaque, the name was wrong. And when we started doing the research on the bios, we found the correct name. And I can't say the name right now. It's in the book, and I don't have one right with me. But it was unbelievable that we found the true name of this man, but the name on the plaque is the other name. So it was just like, it was serendipity sometimes. They're just what we would find. It was really an honor, though. It was emotional to work that intensely on those names and trying to find as many details as we could about each man who made the ultimate sacrifice. It was very important that we do that.
Well, speaking of memorials, can you tell us, are there any other memorials to World War I veterans here in Erie County?
Yes, I have a connection to the World War I Centennial Commission, and they wanted photographs of memorials anywhere that you could find, the World War I memorials. So a couple of us went out and photographed in particular, and I'd like to mention at Wayne Park at 6th and East Avenue is this lovely memorial to Lieutenant Donald McDonald, who he was in the Navy and he served in World War I, and he died accidentally trying to rescue someone in a storm off of the ship was off Rhode Island. It was after the war in the early 1920s. And so the neighbors in that area erected a memorial to him, and it's in Wayne Park there at 6th and East Avenue. In Union City, I hope that many of you who are watching have seen this statue of the Doughboy that's located in a park on High Street, which was the statue was erected in 1926. It's a beautiful rendition of a doughboy. McCain Community Park also has a memorial dedicated to all veterans, but they do specifically say World War I, II. And I thought you'd be interested in knowing that you can go to the corner of Pershing and Patton Street near behind St. George's Church in that development that's up there. If you Google it, you could find those two streets. And that was another thing that the World War I Centennial Commission was looking for, names of places that were commemorating World War I. So those are some of the ones we found.
And like we mentioned earlier, is the ultimate memorial, and that's the stadium at 26th and State Street.
Yes, very fitting that you would mention that, Bill.
Didn't want to forget. I forget it a lot.
Well, getting back to another subject that's near and dear to my heart, it's the Wolverine. My grandfather was a young sailor on board the Wolverine. We do have his picture in the book at the age of 17. And Bill, you did a great job talking about the guys that went away to the Army, but can you talk a little bit about the Wolverine, its crew? You know, where did they go? When did they leave Erie? And what happened ultimately to those young men?
Well, it was amazing. I mean, you have this landlocked, you have these men, 80 men and 5 officers on this landlocked steamship that had been built 70 years before. Now on the war's declared April 6th, and on April 10th, they're marching up State Street and boarding the train to head for the coast. And some they were scattered to some extent. A lot of them went on the USS Iowa, which was a pre-dreadnought. Those of you who are real naval history buffs will know that, yes, it was a warship, yes, it was a battleship, but had it ever encountered top-line ships of the German fleet, down it would have went. But it was nevertheless used for I think for training and maybe for escort duty on the ocean. So some of the men went there, and some went on to an auxiliary ship whose, I think it's the It was basically a transport type ship that a lot of them served on through the course of the war. Yeah, I know I had this thing.
And while you're looking, of course, Captain Morrison, Captain William Morrison was actually a lieutenant commander in rank. He was a captain of the Wolverine, but he ended up serving on the USS Utah, which was a modern battleship. But we have pictures of these fresh-faced young guys and still with their Wolverine caps on, taken in Philadelphia when they arrived in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Naval Yard.
That's cool stuff. By the way, that was one of, I interviewed 2 crewmen from the Wolverine during my, I kind of forgot mentioning them over the years, but Grant Cowley and Ray Jewell.
Ray Jewell was the radio man.
Yeah, and Grant Cowley was on the helm. No, Jewell was on the helm, and he was on. The funny anecdote he told me was they had a saltwater when the Wolverine towed the Niagara in 1913 on Lake Erie. They had a saltwater Navy officer on board, and the saltwater ships, when you say port your helm, that means you steer. You may be steering this way, but the ship's going to turn that way because of the way the pulleys are arranged. They're arranged differently on a freshwater ship. So he says, port your helm. because they see a freighter coming towards it. And so he ports his helm, and now they're steering even more. He said, well, port your helm. So he keeps porting his helm, and they're still steering towards this ship that's coming to them. And at the last minute, they finally figure it out, and they get things steered away, and the Wolverine with the Niagara in tow just barely missed this this freighter in the night on Lake Erie. That was Ray Jewell's story.
So are there any other particular stories that have stuck with you from the research, either on the for the memorial or for the book?
Two of the deaths of very young people stick with me, and I've mentioned one is Ross Douglas. He enlisted in the Canadian Army at age 14 or 15. Got back into the U.S. Army when war was declared. Got in an American Army unit. Was on a ship making its way across the Atlantic Ocean when it was torpedoed, and he was killed when the submarine surfaced and fired a gun right at the ship and killed him. 16 years old when he died. And he's in our book. Another one is Bud Morrison, or Clarence Morrison. He has an eye patch on his photo. He was injured in, he was Company A, by the way. He lived in Waterford area, Company A, 112th. In the Meuse-Argonne, he took an bad injury to his eye, and ultimately had to wear an eye patch. He still was with the unit when they came back. He has his picture taken with his overseas cap and the patch, but he looks like he's about 14 years old himself. I mean, just a kid. And then you see that, ultimately he survived the war, but he died about a year or two later as a direct result of the injuries that were inflicted both because of gas and because of the wound to his head. He died at Hammett Hospital. Interesting thing about that, this is before there was a Veterans Administration, before there's a VA hospital. A lot of these, I'm gathering, because I read about one or two others who died in hospitals shortly after the war, after returning from overseas, died in hospitals where their care was provided, because they've been discharged, their care was provided by the American Legion and the community, not by the VA, not, just by the goodness of people's hearts. Their care was provided for. And, thank God there's a VA now. I know, it has its faults, but thank God there is one. So that they don't have to worry or be concerned or have to go out on the streets to raise money to take care of a battle injury. Those are my two stories.
Unfortunately for us, we have a very good regional VA hospital. It's one of the better ones. It's been modernized, and it cares for, guys from, prior even to World War II, all the way through the most modern veterans. We're very blessed to have that here in Erie, and we're also very blessed to have the Soldier and Sailors Home, which is the first one that was built in Pennsylvania. And I remember as a kid going down and going to the Wayne Blockhouse behind it, seeing veterans who were guides or docents there from the Spanish-American Wars. I'm aging myself, but certainly World War I veterans, and going with my grandfather, who was very active in Veterans Affairs, and seeing the care that the soldiers and sailors were getting there. So Erie as a community is very blessed for the facilities that we have to take care of our veterans.
Yeah.
I think I want to say that the most powerful thing for me was that we were able to honor those who served in World War I and help others remember their sacrifice. And it was a very emotional thing for us to do. And I think that's how I would like to close my statements, is that when we honor our veterans, we're not honoring just those who served in World War I, but those who served in American military throughout. And I think that's so important, and especially to remember that on the eve of Armistice Day, the 123rd anniversary. And I would like to encourage people to purchase the book, because that supports our cause. And thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Well, thank you all for watching, and again, great presentation, Mary Jane and Bill. Again, the Hagen History Center is open tomorrow, tomorrow Veterans Day, with free admission for veterans and discounted memberships if you choose to join us. We do have 3 galleries out of our 20, which are dedicated to Erie men and women in their service. We have a Navy gallery, we have a general military service gallery, and we have a Civil War gallery. So you're welcome to come see us. Again, open Tuesdays and Sundays through Sundays, but tomorrow again for veterans, National Guard, and active duty. Please come down for a free visit. Thank you so much, everyone.